Hey guys, as we switch gears here, we now welcome in Michael Voris, the founder and president of St. Michael's Media, church militant, media enterprise established to address the serious erosion of the Catholic faith. Mike, it is a Friday, and we'll get into some other things here, but you're one of the most knowledgeable men when it comes to a lot of these miracles and the faith and the church over the years that I've ever met, and I know I met you for a reason. And a good part of my faith was because of this. But we wanted to talk about some of these things on our Friday because we keep it wide open when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to paranormal, when it comes to UFOs. We have a free for all Friday. We have fun, and that's what we talk about. But on this Holy Friday, let's break down the Shroud of Turin and the evidence behind it. I mean, we actually have physical evidence, scientific evidence that has been left behind verifying Jesus and what happened.
Yeah, the Shroud of Turin, for those who are not familiar with it, is the burial cloth of our Blessed Lord. It was Jewish custom in the day, 2,000 years ago, that when you laid someone in the tomb, you took a very long white cloth, you laid them on the first half of it, and you draped it over the top of them. So the cloth has, if you were to take the body out, it would have an imprint, so to speak, on the bottom part of the sheet of the backside. That's it right there. And the top half would have obviously the front of the body. The interesting thing about this, the history of it, is it appears in recorded history, it appears, well, aside from the Gospels, there was and there's a very interesting point here. It says in, I believe can't remember if it's John's Gospel or Matthew's Gospel, doesn't matter which one. It says that when they went into the tomb, when Mary Magdalene raced to the apostles and said, hey, I've seen the Lord, and Peter and John went running there. Peter goes into the tomb. John waits for him because he's younger and outruns him, but he waits for him out of respect for Peter and his leadership role, and waits for him at the tomb. And then they go into the tomb, and there's a mention that there were two cloths. One was wrapped up and put at the one end, and a smaller cloth was wrapped up and put on the other end. Because what they used to do was, in the Jewish burial tradition, they do that cloth, but they would also put think of it maybe the size of a pillowcase over the face of the dead. Mm-hmm. And then they'd wrap the cloth and tie them, bound them, put them in various spices and things like that. That's what the women on Easter Sunday morning were going to the tomb to finish, because they're not allowed to do that on the Sabbath or the Passover, which is what that Saturday was. So they took Jesus off the cross Friday, put him in the tomb, and did kind of a really quick, hey, we got to get this done before the sun sets because it's the Sabbath. The next day was Passover, and then obviously they go back Sunday morning very early to sort of finish the burial, anointings and spices and all of that stuff. So the record we have that there was a shroud he was buried in is right there in the Gospels. So this shroud, which is known as the Shroud of Turin, after Turin, Italy, which is where it is now housed and has been for about 500 years, the history of it is recorded in various parts of Western civilization. Appears in the East in recorded history around 300 or 400. It travels to a few different places in Europe. It takes up home in France in a silver reliquary, the big sort of chest box thing, that was placed on an altar in a cathedral in France and was kept by one of the royal families there for a few centuries. There was a fire in that cathedral, and the flames got so intense that some of the silver of the container that it was in, the reliquary, dripped onto the cloth. And if you guys can put the picture back up again, I can show you where those stains are. If you see those little I don't have an ability to move it. Those little kind of long stretches there.
Yes.
Where there's one, two, there's on going down each side. Yep. There's 4 on each side. So the cloth was folded over, and when the melting silver tinged the cloth, those little burn marks were put into it.
Yep.
It was rescued, obviously, because there it is. It was rescued, and an order of nuns sewed it up and repaired the damage. Shortly after that, it was transferred to Turin, Italy, where it now is housed. In I believe it was 1890 or so, a photographer took a picture of it. Back then, pictures were reduced to negatives. It's not like your cell phone. And when he developed the picture, he saw in the negative, you had a picture up already of our Lord's face. When whatever's light is dark and whatever's dark is light. So that is the image of our blessed Lord in the tomb laying there. So when that picture emerged, I mean, you could see the faint image just by the naked eye over there on your screen left. But it was the advent of photography which actually brought out the fullness of all of that. So it's kind of in reverse. When that happened in the late 1890s, and this kind of got around the world like, holy Moses, we sort of thought this was Jesus's burial cloth, but we can actually see an image of what he looked like immediately after the crucifixion, laying there in the tomb. So a whole bunch of scientific research started on the things. They wanted to date the shroud. They wanted to test the serum, blood serum that was on it.
That's what I want to do. I want to get into the science.
I thought that they did DNA. Didn't they do DNA testing on the shroud?
They did DNA and carbon.
Okay, I thought so.
They did carbon testing. They did DNA. They've done the pollen testing. They did the DNA testing. They've done all sorts of things. So, and here's the interesting point. The other cloth that I mentioned called the sudarium, which laid over the face, that particular cloth has been for 1,500 years in Spain. That was always known. This is the cloth that laid over the face of Jesus in the tomb. And that, obviously back in the, first millennia and up until even recently, they weren't able to do DNA testing. So they were actually able to do DNA testing on the blood on both of those cloths, those linens. They both came back AB positive. Which is the universal blood donor part. So anybody can have AB blood transfused into them. It is the universal blood, which certainly on a scientific level is very interesting that those two cloths match up like that. And secondly, on a theological, spiritual level, that the blood of Christ can be united to any single individual on earth who so wants that transfusion. Is quite a moving thing. It's that science and faith kind of blending together thing, and you won't find that any more than here. I'll let you guys ask questions and things in a second. Just the one last thing, the image on the shroud. The question is, how did that image get on the shroud? That's been the baffling question.
Yeah.
Because the image is only on the very, it's linen, and the image is only on the very top surface. It doesn't go all the way through. It's only on the very top surface of those threads, those linen threads. And the latest scientific research says that the amount of energy that would have blasted forth to create that image, like an instant singe. You've seen those pictures, for example, of the atomic bombs having dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that the intensity of the blast was so intense that while the people were vaporized, their shadows were burned onto the ground.
Right.
Well, that doesn't even begin to match this. The image, the amount of energy released, there is no way. Nothing. We have no technology on Earth that could make that amount of energy in that quick thing. Wow. It's something like 300 gigatons.
So fascinating.
Gigawatts of energy, which is essentially a little bit hotter than the sun. So what you actually have,
in theory, that's not even the most, the moment that he died, in theory, would have been the most energy.
Well, because there was no decompensation, if if the body had decomposed, I'm trying to say, it would leave something like that. But the body didn't decompose because
Correct.
obviously he rose. So it had to have caused something like that.
Is it okay? Is it okay?
What that picture is on the shroud? Because do you guys have a picture of the full negative, or do you just have the face of the negative?
No, we had it
I
up.
just had those two pictures.
We did have it up.
Okay, put up the face again, and let me point something out to you. Notice the way his hair is falling.
Okay.
If you're laying down flat, your hair falls back.
Yeah.
His hair is straight forward.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, so are his feet. His feet are hanging like this. Dead man's feet are like this.
Right,
when you're
right.
laying down. They
Yes.
kind of lay at an angle. His feet
Scotty,
are like
you
this.
working on that, buddy?
Say it again.
No, I was talking to Scotty.
Oh,
you didn't hear it. We've been waiting. Can you pop the picture back up? He asked you to pop the picture back up.
Okay. So
the face.
The feet are down.
Yeah, it's hard if you don't have the negative.
I was looking for the other shroud that he was talking about.
But notice his hair.
Yeah.
So he what you have here is there's simply no explanation for the body's posture with the effects of gravity. What you have is that our Lord rose and stood up with the shroud still on him, and then at the moment of his resurrection, this tremendous energy greater than is emitted from the sun blasted onto that. So what you have here is a picture of the moment of the resurrection.
I never heard that one before. That's interesting.
Especially with the science.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. And the science backs all this up.
The science is so important, especially we have to have faith. Obviously, if you're a Christian, you have faith. But to have the science.
Explain the feet then. You were about to explain the feet.
Yeah. If somebody is dangling you, let's say you're just sort of dangling in midair. And how are your feet going to be? Your feet aren't going to be, your feet will be hanging like that.
It will be perpendicular to the ground, right?
Correct. Yeah. Everything there is exactly as, so the body's laying there, here's the head, it comes up.
Yes.
And then bam. And at that point, because now he has a glorified body, he can simply pass through, like he passed through the walls when he was going to see the apostles up in the upper room a few hours later. He would simply pass through that shroud. And the angels are the ones who took it and wrapped it up and put the head covering over on the one end and wrapped the shroud up and put it on the other. It is quite the moment of Easter, like just shock for this.
It makes sense. Let me ask you this. So the shroud, what was the history of the first person to have found that shroud to actually put it in a safe enough place to where it's accessible to us today? Where did the shroud go from the first person that found it in the tomb?
Well, I think it's probably very reasonable to conclude the apostles took it. The apostles or Mary Magdalene, that first very small, tiny group of Christians there, the people who had, witnessed the crucifixion and been followers of our Lord in Capernaum and Galilee and Jerusalem and everything else, they would have been the ones who would have secured the shroud. They also secured the Sudarium. Remember, these are Jews. They understand the significance of this entire burial thing. They're the ones who did it. Joseph of Arimathea is, a good Jew. It was his tomb. They understood. There's a very intense ritual around the burying of the dead. You have to be in the ground before sunset. Many Jews today even still practice that. You'll sit Shiva, which we would call a wake, after the burial.
Yeah.
It's just part of so the importance of the burial, the importance of the body, and it being properly taken care of. In the Catholic faith, that's called a corporal work of mercy. There are 7 of them. The last one is care for the dead, because the body was created by God and given to the person to be a composite. We're not just some soul in some random body.
Yeah.
This is me. That is you. Everybody listening, that is you. It's part of you.
It's amazing to think that with the technology that we have today, we were able to get this AI, is just weeks away from being able to put a 3D version of this shroud, and basically
there actually was a 3D version of the body already made. Interestingly enough, it was the United States Air Force Academy, and two, I believe they were captains. I might be wrong on their ranks, maybe majors, because of all the engineering involved and the aeronautical this and that, and the three-dimensional thing and all that. They actually created a 3D image, a life-size 3D image. They know our Lord's weight, they know his height, from all of that 3D imaging. And interestingly, when you through electron microscopy, when you sort of zoom in on the eyelids, you see the coins. It's hard to see in that one. You have to really look at it on an electronic microscope.
Oh, I've seen that one before, Mike, where you see the coins.
Yeah, you see the coins. Why did they do that? So that the eyes wouldn't open. So the eyelids wouldn't open. Every last detail of that, the pollen that they have extricated from it, from the fibers of the tree, is a pollen that is only found in and around Jerusalem. The actual linen cloth that was used is only a linen that was spun in the Middle East. The actual way the fibers are weaved together. I mean, every different cultures do these things differently. They learn different tricks of the trade, so to speak. Well, that weaving is what used to be the case 2,000 years ago, as they have other samples of, linen from, extant from back then as well. There's very little question that is the shroud.
Well, let me play devil's advocate, because
I always heard a story that the shroud was moved to Ephesus with Mary Magdalene and the Virgin Mother Mary.
Well, then that would explain that one question. Yeah,
because we visited that when we were on tour for the DOD.
Yeah,
we went to Ephesus, which is the house where they got all this gum stuck on the wall. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
The history is fascinating.
I would love to know how that happens, and how the Knights of the Templar are involved in all of this stuff, and the fact that NPR comes out and does an entire radio show of how this is carbon dated back to 1400 and how it can't be the Shroud. It's a fascinating piece of lineage in this whole discussion. But for Christians, who Christians love to have their trinkets and their crosses and everything, this is the trinket of all trinkets. This is literally a photo ID of a man who was put to death that came back to life. There's no body. There's shroud.
There's a burned image on there. It's a blast of light. I don't want to say burned like it's scorched. I don't mean it that way. But the blast of energy.
It's an X-ray. It's an X-ray.
It's essentially an X-ray at the instant of the resurrection. Yeah. And the carbon dating thing that NPR reported, when I was when I left Notre Dame, graduated from Notre Dame, and I got into secular news. Skip that part in my.
By the way, I forgot. Mike is a 4-time Emmy-winning news reporter as well. Mike, I screwed up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When I was at CBS in New York, in Manhattan, working, I used to work on evening news with Dan Rather and 60 Minutes, and a bunch of that in the early days of my career. And I remember the glee that Dan Rather led the evening newscast. Yes. This was about 1985, right around there. And he was like, "Oh, the Shroud of Turin is a medieval forgery."
Right.
And carbon dating.
Yes.
And I'm like, settle down. What they had done, the little particular portion of the shroud that had been taken out for the carbon dating.
Yes.
Was very near to the area where the silver had dropped on it and melted it, and the stitching had been, done to fix it up. They took a portion of the shroud that was not the original shroud.
Right.
And interestingly enough, what their carbon dating proved is, that's the year that it was all sewn back up. So thanks very much for your confirmation of that historical fact.
Or proving that it's true. First of all, Michael,
damn Dan Rather.
I remember you from the news back in the day. So I do. I in fact, I knew your name.
This is her hitting on you, by the way.
Oh, it is not. But I want to switch to something a little different because it's something Vic and I had touched base on earlier when he was talking about topics for the show. Would be the Catholic saints. You know, my stepfather worked for the
Well, let's show.
archdiocese.
Can we start with here? And
Yeah.
Scotty, get ready for St. Padre Pio. If people were done with the turn, if we were done,
I can one more question about the Turin first,
Okay.
and then
let me just one more cut because he brought up a great point. Can I? And you can make this a quick answer if you want to. Why does media want to disprove this thing so bad? In your opinion, why would a Dan rather?
They hate God, Christ, and the Catholic Church. Anything they can do to discredit it, because the entire moral fabric of all of Western civilization, all of it, is based on Catholic teaching. So if you want to destroy the West, you have to destroy Catholic teaching. You want to destroy Catholic teaching, you got to destroy the credibility of the church. So if you can go after every one of these little signs and symbols and say, oh, that's a fake. Oh, they've always been lying to you. Oh, it's crap. Oh, you can kill children by the millions. You can do whatever you want. You can trans this. There's no moral code. That's all crap. So they go after every little single thing they can. In the end, truth is like water. It always finds a way.